It's a passt nicht. It's not nice that you are schlepping these heavy woods on your shoulders. I can get a goy from the street and I'll pay him a few ruble and he will carry these planks of wood for you. Don't do it yourself. The mother of the Chedisharim answers her son, I should give away this mitzvah to a goy and I should not pay him? I'm going to be mekayim a mitzvah to schlep wood to give to the poor people. They should have wood for Shabbos to heat their houses. I'm going to do it myself. In this past Parshas Nosoi, we learn something very unique. Moshe Rabbeinu turns to Klal Yisrael, to the Bnei Merori and to the Bnei Gershon, and he gives them wagons to schlep all parts of the Mishkan. There's one group, the Bnei Kahas, they don't get wagons. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm not giving you wagons, you're going to schlep it all by yourself. The Pasuk says, Bakosev Yisoi, they carried it on their shoulders. What did they carry on their shoulders? The Klei HaMishkan, the Shilchon, the Menorah, the Mizbeach, the Oroin. All those Klei HaMishkan were carried on the shoulders of the Bnei Kahas. On Friday afternoon at 5 p.m., I called Rabbi Rosen to ask him directions to this conference today. And I asked him, may I ask you where you are? He says to me, I'm still here in Manhattan in the college, setting everything up myself with my wife. I say, Rabbi Rosen, you don't have enough people. You can't ask the Goyim to set it up yourself. He says, Azah Heilige Moised, Azah Heilige Conference, is Bakusev Yisui. I want to carry it on my own shoulders. I think it's appropriate to give a Hartze Yasher Koyach to Rabbi and Mrs. Rosen for making this gathering here today. But there's something more which hit me. What were the Bnei Kahas carrying? They were carrying the Shilchon, the Mizbeach, and the Oroin. That's who Rabbi Rosen feels he is carrying. Du sitzen a Zibbe von Chushe V'Yiden, wo's me ken ze alle mit Damazan, they are all equivalent to the Klei HaMishkan. But which Klei HaMishkan? The Oroin, the Mizbeach, the Menorah, and the Shilchon. Those were the most appropriate and most choshev parts of the Mishkan. And ich sag ein Ziraboi sei, wenn Mashiach wird kommen, wird der Chushe V'Zibbe sein, die was werden trugen die Klei HaMishkan. You will be standing at the forefront when Mashiach will be coming and carrying these kelim and being close to Mashiach. B'mheira v'yomeni omen. As I mentioned the Chedisharim, I'll mention him again. The Chedisharim once met his dear friend who learned together with him in yeshiva, Rabbi Radzamina, the Heilige Radzamina Tzaddik. Actually, the Gerer Rebbe today is called after him, heißt auch Yankel, noch der Radzamina. And the Chedisharim notices the Radzamina Zayat Zibrochen. It was Parshas Bahaloischo, the week of this week's Parsha. And he sees his Zibrochen. And he asks his friend, what's the matter? What's geschehen? What's bitte Zibrochen? He says, when it comes to Bamidbar, I get Zibrochen, I get Ba'atzvas. Why? Because in Parshas Bahaloischo, the Yidden sinned to the Rabbeinu Shalom. In Parshas Shalach was the Meraglim. In Parshas Koirach there was a fight in Klal Yisrael. In Parshas Chikas the Yidden sinned. In Parshas Bulak, every Parsha, Pinchas, every week's Parsha is du Zerbrochenkeit, is du a virus, was Klal Yisrael haben geteen werf zerbrochen. Rief zu der Chedisharim zum Heiligen Radzamina, sagte, Yankel, Yankel, ja, ja. Und als in Jiddisch, weil es gesucht in Jiddisch. Aber von seiner Weihre ist geworden eine ganze Teure. Wer weiß, wusste a Teure hat rausgegeben von unseren Mitzvahs. And I'll say it in English, and he said to him, from their virus, from their sins, we created a whole Sefer Bamidbar. Who knows what we will be creating from our mitzvahs? So we are reading this week's Parsha of Parshas Bahaloischo, when the Parsha starts about the Menorah. Is do a moirdige Wort von dem Henach Alexander Zechroine Levruche, a nifledige Wort. He says, it says, El mil panei ha-menorah ye'iri shivas haneros. Opposite the menorah, they will light the 7 neiros. What is the word El mil, the opposite? And he says, when a person stands on the other side of the table, he sees his chesroinus. He sees the things that he didn't do well. But if he really thinks about the things that he hasn't done well, then afterwards it will be Yo'iri Shivas HaNeiros. The light will come to him and he will become a great tzaddik. And he says, sometimes people are sitting on the other side of the table, like many of us here today. We were sitting on the other side of the table and we were hearing chesroinus. We were hearing things that we didn't want to hear. Zogt Reb Heinach Alexander, aber eventually in the very near future, if you were sitting on that other side of the table, you will be zoiche to your iri shivas haneiris. The Rebbeinu Shloim puts you on the other side of the table for one reason, so that in very near future, you will be zoiche to your iri shivas haneiris. Talking about this week's parsha, a very complicated parsha. So many things happened to Klal Yisrael. And on everything that happened, there was another chance given. Aharon HaKohen wanted to light the menorah, and he said, I can't light the menorah because I wasn't part of giving the karbonos when my friends brought the karbonos. Then Klal Yisrael is complaining at the Rebbeinu Shloim, they need food. The Rebbeinu Shloim says, I'll give you another chance, and he sends them down the Slav. The Leviim were in a position in which they didn't know how to handle themselves. The Rebbeinu Shloim says, let me lift you up. And then goes the parsha of Pesach Sheni. The people, Klal Yisrael, was screaming, Lama Nagura, why should we be different? We were not zoicha to the Pesach Rishon, we want to be zoicha to be makriv korban Pesach. And last but not least, the parsha of Miriam speaking Lashon Hara, Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Rebbeinu Shloim says, I'll give her also another chance. So in every section of this week's parsha, the Rebbeinu Shloim turns to Klal Yisrael, turns to Moshe Rabbeinu, turns to Aharon HaKohen, and turns to Miriam. I will give you another chance. Zug de Chedisharim. Von der Parsha lernt man as a Charos, as a Yid to kaimul nish aufgeben. There's always another chance. If you miss the boat the first time, never be meyayish and say, now it's all over. There is always a second chance. In Oybayid, Zukt the Chedisharim, Zukt Chas V'Shulam, Aros V'en Zalmole, for Yid says out of his mouth those words, I missed the boat, he is an apikoiris. It is amin. Nobody should ever dare say, I missed the boat, Chas V'Shulam. The Rebbeinu Shloim tells us in this week's parsha, every single Yid has a chance to be part of Klal Yisrael, and that's why we are here today. And let me tell you a moiridige story which I read recently. We all know, it's a große tzaddik, and there's not a house, I think, that this name is never mentioned, Reb Kiva Eiger, Zechroine Lebruche. There was a man who lived in a town near Reb Kiva Eiger who suddenly got sick with a certain disease, and they went from doctor to doctor, and every single doctor gave up hope. And he was laying in bed. Another week and another week, he was going weaker and weaker and schwacher Nebuch, until the doctor said, there's nothing we can do, and Nebuch, he is about to die. There's a rumor going on in town that the king and all his people are coming to visit this town. Reb Kiva Eiger wanted to be part of seeing the king, and he goes to this town. The people knew that where the king travels, his roifer, his doctor, the special doctor to the king, always travels with him. And they went to this doctor and asked him, maybe you can come and visit this very sick man who all the doctors have given up hope. Maybe you can help him. He says, of course. I happen to be in town. I will soon go and visit him and see what I can do for him. And he goes and visits this choile, this sick man, and he sees the situation, and he says, unfortunately, I have to agree to what everybody has just said. There is no medical refuah. There is no healing for this man. I'm sorry, and he leaves. Reb Kiva Eger hears this, and he decides he wants to speak to the doctor privately. And he asks for an audience with the doctor, and the doctor, who had heard about the godless of Reb Kiva Eger, was asking to meet the Reb Kiva Eger privately. And they're sitting in the room, and the Reb Kiva Eger says to the doctor, "I'd like to ask you a question." He says, "Please go ahead. But before I ask the question, I want to apologize if maybe I'm asking something which may hurt your feelings." And the doctor says, "Go ahead." And Rabbi Kiva Eger asks the doctor the following question. If this man who is sick with this certain disease would be the king himself, would you also give the same answer? The doctor was quiet. And Rabbi Kiva Eger saw he hit a very sore point. And he apologizes to the doctor. And the doctor answers him as follows. Let me explain why I feel that this man cannot be healed. And let me be honest to tell you that if this was the king, yes, I would be able to heal him. To find the cure to this disease, there's a certain bird, which to get hold of this bird, you have to go into the deserts where all the animals are. You have to kill all the animals. And there's a certain tree where this bird is usually resting upon. There's no way that a human being can go through the deserts with all the chayas and animals and not get hurt and bring back this bird. But the king has soldiers. The king has armies. And if the king goes out to the desert and shoots and kills all the animals, all the lions and the tigers of the wild of the deserts, he can get hold of this bird and bring it back. And if he brings back the wrong bird, he can go back again with his soldiers and kill all the animals again to finally find this bird that is needed to heal this man. But no human being, it's impossible for one person to go and get that bird. Therefore I said that there's no hope and there's no cure for this man. And with that, the doctor and Reb Kiva Eger say goodbye, and that's the end of scene 1. Reb Kiva Eger goes into his house and he says, if a melech borsa v'dam, if a king who is flesh and blood has the opportunity and has the qualifications to go into the deserts and to bring back such a bird, the melech malchei hamlochim, the Rebbeinu Shloilem himself, can avada get hold of such a bird. And he locks himself into his room for hours, and he's mispalal for this choile, that the Rebbeinu Shloilem should do some miracle and some nes, and this bird should be able to come. Suddenly, while he's davening, there's a crash, bang, noise on the roof of the house of Reb Kiva Eger. Sounded like bricks were falling down on the house. Reb Kiva Eger goes out and looks and sees what happens. Nobody knows. And he sends up somebody to the roof. And he comes down and he says, Rebbe, there's a dead bird on the roof. Zogt Reb Kiva Eger, bring me down that dead bird. And they go and they bring down that dead bird and load the simunim that the king had given, the doctor of the king had given to him. This looked like that bird. And they took the bird and they cooked it and made a soup out of it. This was instruction from the doctor. And they gave it to this choile. And Baruch Hashem, he was saved. And after a couple of days, he was walking around. Reb Kiva Eger had gebeten, they should take a few feathers of this bird and keep it in the house of this choile. Goes by a couple of months, the king and his whole pamalia were traveling back through this town. And the doctor remembered the story of this sick man who he had visited, and he was mostly sure that he was dead by now, but he decided to go and see what lemaisa happened to this man. And he knocks on the door and he asks, where is this man? And they say, he's not home now. What do you mean he's not home now? Is he in the Beis HaKvoros? Is he dead? No, he's not. He's out in shul and he's davening and he should be home within the next 20 minutes. And the doctor says, I don't believe it. I'm staying here to meet him. And the man comes back and he walks in the house, frisch and gesinnt, Baruch Hashem. And the doctor says, tell me what happened. And he says, There's a tzaddik, Rabbi Kiva, who was davening and the bird fell on his roof and he took the bird and he gave me soup and I was healed. He didn't believe it. They sent a messenger to Rabbi Kiva to ask him, how can we prove to this doctor what had happened? Rabbi Kiva said, remember I told you to put away a few feathers from that bird. Go and search and bring those feathers to the doctor and ask him if those are the matching feathers to the bird that he wanted us to give him. And they take out the feathers and the doctor sees this and he faints. And he says, from now on I'll never ever say mechanisch. I'll never tell a sick person that you are going to die if I know there is some refuah, some healing which could be done. But only, the doctor says, if it's a Yid. Only if it's a Yid. Ich sehe the koyach atfila by Enk Yiden. I see the power of prayer by Enk Klal Yisrael. I will never give up on a choylef in Klal Yisrael. This week's parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu was standing and begging for Miriam, his sister. Listen to this sharpe word von Reb Shloime Kliger. Sogt Reb Shloime Kliger. Die Gemara sagt in Shabbos, Hamavaze Talmud Chochem, somebody who embarrasses a Talmud Chochem, ein leire fiele makoso, he has no healing to his makkah. Somebody who is ashamed, who embarrasses a Talmud Chochem, can never get healed. What happened here, fragt Reb Shloime Kliger? Miriam embarrassed Moshe Rabbeinu. How was she healed? Sogt Reb Shloime Kliger. Moshe Rabbeinu created a new tefillah. Moshe Rabbeinu saw that Kashim Tefillah geht nicht helfen, hat gedavnt an neue tefillah, kein nu refu nu la. He said, Unu Hashem Oishionu, Unu Hashem Oishionu. Und mit dem Tefillah hat ausgebeten, als Miriam soll bleiben leben. Sucht Reb Shloime Kliger. From this Maamar Chazal, from this Pasuk in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu led the foundation for Klal Yisrael that there's never a situation that the Yid should be in a Eis Tzorah and the Rabbeinu Shloilem should not help him if he reads and says the proper tefillah to the Rabbeinu Shloilem. And he continues on and he asks, but how come when somebody is dying, the last few days of his life, things always get better, and then suddenly he passes away? Zukt because the Yetzer Hara verleikt sich. And he knows that Yidden davenim for a choyle, and with tefillahs of Klal Yisrael, they are able to bring back the worst choyle. So the Yetzer Hara makes the choyle feel a little bit better. His pulse rate goes back up, his blood pressure goes back to normal. So everybody stops davening. Zogt Reb Shloime Kliger, wenn a Yid wird gedavnt für any choyle in Klal Yisrael, wollte nicht nifte geworden, weil der Rabbeinu Shloilem ist Shemaya tefillah as kolpe. I will end with a story that I heard myself from a man, a shtickl Ruv, heißt Rav Friedman. He lives in Eretz Yisrael. I happened to meet him now, Sukkos, in Eretz Yisrael, and he told me over this most fascinating story. I found this story in a sefer, in an akdoma of a sefer of Rav Galitzki. He writes in his sefer this story, but I heard it firsthand. This Rabbi Friedman was standing at the airport, leaving from Eretz Yisrael to London. He looks behind him, and he sees Rabbi Galitzki is standing behind him. And I'm going back to those days, and I'm sure nobody in this room would remember when tickets used to be written out by hand. Maybe now that there's not going to be any internet service, tickets will go back and be written out by hand again. It's Kenzan. Anyways, and he saw Rabbi Yankov standing behind him. He said, Rabbi Yankov, Geitz Koidem. And Rabbi Yankov Galitzki shows his ticket to the person standing by the register. And they look at the ticket and say, excuse me, this ticket is not signed. It's no signature on this ticket. You can't travel. Rabbi Yankov Galitzki didn't understand English. So he asked this man, what was it gesagt? He said that you can't travel with this ticket because it's not signed. So he says to Rav Friedman, tell him that as the Rabbeinu Shloilem will, as ich soll fuhren mit dem Plan, ehrlich sein auf dem Plan. If the Rebbeinu Shalom wants me to be on this airplane, I will be there. He thinks to himself, I'm not going to say that because I'm next online and I don't need to be bumped off the plane, and he doesn't say anything. Rabbi Galitzki walks away, and he goes, and he was scared already what he's going to say to his ticket at the Chochayid, and he shows his ticket and says, no problem, your ticket is okay, you can get on the plane. And he had time to get on the plane. He went to Daven Mariv, and after he finishes Mariv, he goes on the plane, he walks on the plane, and Rabbi said, lo and behold, he turns around, and who does he see sitting on the plane? Rabbi Galitzki. Sagt der Rebbe, ich verstehe nicht what happened. Sagt Rabbi Galitzki, didn't I say to you before that oi ich darf fliehen auf dem Aeroplan, der Rebbeinu Shalom mich herauflegen auf dem Aeroplan? Sagt ja, aber was Bescheid? So Rabbi Galitzki tells him, do me a favor, sit down right next to me over here. And he thinks, I made enough trouble before, I'm not going to sit in my wrong seat. But the Rabbi Yankel told him, sit over here, and he sits down next to him. And he says to him, I want to tell you my life history and why I was so sure that if the Rebbeinu Shalom wants me to get on this plane, I'll be here. Let me tell you my story. I was a bocher, and I was learning in my yeshiva in Bialystok that was near the Russian Chelik. And when the whole parsha of Auschwitz and the whole story happened, the Russians came in and took us to Siberia. We traveled 10 days in a wagon, we thought we were going to die on the way. Finally, we arrived in Siberia, and we thought that the wagon was Gehenna. Dort man schon gesehen, Mamash was heißt Gehenna. For 15 years, we suffered in Siberia. Little did we know, he says, that all our brothers and sisters and family members had perished in Auschwitz-Nebuch. But I dreamt every night the same dream, that one day I will meet up with my mother, and I will give my mother a kiss on her hand to thank her that she gave away her bread every day to send me to Cheder, that I should be able to learn Torah. After 15 struggling years, I go to Eretz Yisrael with this machshava that soon I'm going to find my mother and I'm going to give her the hug. Ich drei mich herum in Jerusalem, in Bnei Barak, ich sehe meine Mama. Ein Kol wie ein Neune, I cannot find her. I did research and I found out that my mother is no longer alive. She perished with every one of my family members in Auschwitz. Yemach Shemon v'zichram. I'm walking the streets of Bnei Barak, and I gave up my life. I thought my life is over. I was walking through the streets of Bnei Barak v'yam shigana. Somebody comes over to me and he says to me, Bucherl, was is mit dir? And I told him, ich habe mich miyayish gewinnt für mein Leben. My life is not worth living anymore because I have no family. So this man says to me, S'du a Yid in Bnei Barak, was heißt der Chazanish? Go into him, maybe he can help you. And I'm thinking to myself, how can anybody help me? Ich bin zerbrochen. Ich bin miyayish. Who's going to help me? But I listened and I went into the Heilige Chazanish. And I go in and it's a gießt sich Tränen, ich wein mich aus dem Chazanish. And ich sage, Rabbi, ich kann nicht auf was zu leben. I have no reason to continue on my life because I have nobody in my family who was left and I'm a bocher alone. And the Chazanish listened to every word that I said. And he turns around to me and he says to me, I want to tell you a story. There was once a man who lived in a small little dorf, a small little town, a village, who for Parnasa, he used to go and borrow money from people and go to the Yerid, go to the big town, sell the material, buy material, bring it back to his hometown, sell it again, pay back everybody every few months, again and again and again. Once he borrowed money from everybody in his hometown, and as he's walking in his own house, he falls and he breaks his leg. And he thinks to himself, I cannot go to the Yerid, I cannot go and buy anything because ich kann nicht gehen. So he asks his wife, do me a favor, you go. You travel to the big town, you go and buy everything and bring it back for me. And he gives her directions exactly where to go and who to meet and exactly the man who she's going to meet and buy the materials from. She packs her bags with the money and she goes to this town. She arrived and she sees hundreds of people shouting and screaming, buying and selling, and she faints. She wasn't used to such a tumult. She came from a small little town. Finally, they gave her some water and she came to sich. And she goes on and she finds this man who she has to make this deal with. And she says to him, my husband sent me with the money, I would like to buy this and this and this and this. And she buys and she makes the deal. And she puts her hand in her pocket to take out her wallet. V'ainani, the money is not here. She thinks to herself, most probably when I fainted before, somebody must have taken it out of my pocket or it fell out of my pocket. And she goes hysterical. It's not my money. My husband borrowed the money from so many people. What am I going to do now? And she's walking around here and there. Somebody comes over to her and says to her, I saw somebody walking around with a wallet of money. Maybe that's yours. And they go over to a man who has a wallet with money and ask him, is this your wallet? He says, no. Where did you find it? I found it half an hour ago lying next to a woman on the floor. So this woman says, does it have 2 pieces of paper around it? He says, yes. She says, that's my money, give it back to me. He says, excuse me. There's no reason for me to give you back this money. What do you mean it's my money? There's a halacha, if there's a town which most of the people are goyim, and somebody loses money there, you do not have to return it for 2 reasons. First of all, maybe a goy lost it. And second of all, even if a yid lost it, he was zecher on the money. So there's no reason for me to give you back the money. Of course, a whole tumult happened. And they went to Bezdin. And by Bezdin, this woman says, this is my money. You can count it exactly. This is my money. And he should give it back to me. The Bezdin turns around to this man and says to him, what's your taina? And he says to the Bezdin, was heißt? Der erste Rabbi Akim. Jid hat sich mejayish gewehen. Ich gebe es nicht zurück. I have my own family to support. And who says I have to give it back to her? The Bezdin hat gepasken that this man is right. He doesn't have to give back the money to this poor woman. Halucha is halucha. Das teure. She goes out of the house hysterically, and somebody says to her, Du Aruv, heißt der Rabbi Yitzchak al-Chon Spector, the Kovner Rov. Maybe you go into him, maybe he can help you. And she walks into the Rav and tells the whole story. And the Rav says he wants to discuss this shaila with his Bezdin. They bring along the Bezdin, and the Bezdin explain from where they gave out the Psak Halacha that this man can hold on to this money. Zug the Kovner Ruf zum Bezdin. You all made a big mistake. What mistake? Very well and very good that this woman was meyayish from the money. But it's not her money. The money is her husband's money. And as long as her husband was not meyayish from the money, it belongs to him, and give back the money. The Chazon Ish turns around to Rav Galitzki, this bocher, and says to him, the Welt is nicht deine, sollst dich meyayish an. The world, it doesn't belong to you, that you should give up hope. The world belongs to the Rabbi.